It was a normal day in the city when a group of friends was preparing for a weekend getaway dedicated only to men. Vince could hardly get out of bed because he was still suffering after his recent divorce. Neil was leaving behind a brief two-night stand, while the other girl was screaming and scolding him for treating her like an easy woman. Graham was also arguing with his boyfriend. He explained that this trip did not allow women to participate. Mike was also having trouble at home because his wife knew very well that men's gatherings often involved other women. To prevent his wife from demanding a divorce, he even secretly taped the wedding ring to her finger while she was sleeping. Patrick chose to listen to his stress therapy recordings instead of listening to his wife's nagging, because this weekend they were supposed to have dinner with his in-laws. Finally, there was Matt, a comic book store owner, who even went to argue with young children about fictional characters. That day, he behaved so rudely to a child that later the shop's display glass was vandalized. The group met at a bar, where they discussed plans for the weekend such as playing golf. However, Vince remained silent and sad, especially when he saw the photo of his ex-wife in his wallet. Meanwhile, Banksy was late because he realized he had left his phone at home. Worse still, he also left his keys inside, causing himself to be locked out. His friends tried to call him, but since he didn't answer, they thought he was just being lazy and didn't want to go. Not long after, the minibus they hired arrived and the group discovered the driver was a woman. Neil immediately nicknamed her Candy, which made her show contempt and annoyance toward him. Tired of waiting, the group decided to depart to pick up Banksy. At this point, he was standing in the middle of the road because his van had broken down, even being mocked by a traffic cop for the pathetic state of the vehicle. On the way, Candy tried to cheer Vince up by saying there are things worse than divorce, such as murder. And surprisingly, that made Vince feel better. She was also curious as to why they chose Moodley as their destination, because that place was like a remote corner at the end of the world located in the middle of the deep forest. Vince explained that they would stay in Mike's grandmother's house while she was away. Neil excitedly added that in that village, the number of women outnumbered men by a ratio of 4-to-1. A few hours later, the minibus suddenly stopped because the road ahead was blocked by rotting animal carcasses. Initially, the men were too disgusted so no one wanted to do anything, but when Candy herself started pulling everything off the road without fear of dirt or the stench, Vince went down to help her. Meanwhile, Mike said that his grandmother was on a cruise, and her house had builders coming for repairs. And the group only now realized the old lady had no idea they were coming to stay. Right then, Vince received a call from his ex-wife, reminding him that he had to sign the divorce papers, while Mike received a call from his wife, who was threatening to touch his PlayStation. Neil was fed up with all that whining, so he asked everyone to put their phones in a bag so they could focus on relaxing. A while later, they arrived at Moodley. As the men stepped off the minibus, Candy put drops in her eyes because they were red. At that time, it was just before sunset, but somehow the whole village looked strangely deserted. The group began to walk around, and when a football rolled by, they kicked it back and forth for fun without realizing there was a bloodstain on the ball. Seeing no one around, Graham decided that Mike would go break into his grandmother's house to prepare the accommodation while the others went for a drink. On the way to the pub, Matt separated from the group out of curiosity in front of a shop called Burning Witch, which displayed all kinds of disgusting objects. He also noticed that all the remaining election posters belonged to the same female politician who was being sponsored by a detergent brand, while the posters of other candidates had all been torn down. Meanwhile, Mike searched under all the garden gnomes in his grandmother's garden for a spare set of keys, but failed to notice a severed hand lying in the lawnmower. As soon as he found the key, he finally discovered bloody handprints on the fence. Out of curiosity, he looked behind the fence and was horrified to see a female zombie in a wedding dress eating intestines. When she saw him, she picked up an axe and started chasing him. In the pub, Neil went to the restroom and saw the woman in the next stall bleeding much more than normal. Later, he returned to the group and realized there was a strong foul smell in the air. They talked without knowing that behind the bar there was a rotting corpse. Since there was no one to serve them, the group went outside to find Matt and saw a hooded beggar woman appear on the street. They were still wondering whether to throw her a few coins or not when suddenly Sergeant Gavin lunged at the beggar and tried to kill her with his knife. The group rushed to help the woman. Vince charged in to attack Gavin to punch him, but Gavin easily pinned Vince to the ground. Neil also rushed into the fight and punched the soldier in the chest, but was then thrown far away by Gavin. Then the beggar grabbed the knife and stabbed Neil in the hand. Gavin tried to explain what was happening, but Vince knocked him out. Right then, Mike appeared and used a garden gnome to smash the beggar's head, revealing the truth that she was actually a terrifying zombie. Mike immediately explained that this whole village had turned into a miniature zombie apocalypse, then pointed toward the road where infected women were approaching them. The group hurried back to the minibus, carrying the unconscious Gavin as they ran, but then they discovered Candy had also been infected by this time. Neil immediately closed the minibus door and the group decided to run to Mike's grandmother's house. On the way, they were disgusted to see a soldier disemboweled and stuck on a fence. Neil approached to take the soldier's gun. But right then, the soldier woke up and told him that the gun was out of bullets. He also warned them not to go into the woods, then laughed when Vince asked what was in there. Suddenly, the bride zombie appeared behind the soldier and split his head in two. The group screamed in fear then ran away, finally reaching Mike's grandmother's house, where Mike again fumbled for the keys in his numerous pockets. His friends grabbed paint buckets and started throwing them at the zombies, while an infected female hairdresser got close enough to attack Matt. Luckily, Vince stopped her in time by dazing her with black paint. Then Mike finally found the key and the group rushed inside, making the zombies retreat. Vince was extremely angry because their weekend had been ruined. And Neil tried to call for help but his phone had no signal. All the zombies they saw were women. Therefore, instead of the usual type of infection through bites, Vince suggested there was something in the air that only affected female bodies. Right then, Neil looked out the window and was surprised to see a flock of crows cawing loudly. That sudden noise woke Gavin up, and he explained that all the men in the village were dead. Matt deduced that this must be a biological weapon that had gone out of control, but Gavin only replied that the information was top secret. Tension began to rise as the group cornered him, demanding a better explanation. But right then, Patrick announced that the kettle had boiled, so everyone sat down to drink tea. The truth was that in this village, no one had ever survived long enough to find a cure and most of the zombie pack was now wandering in the forest to hunt for fresh meat. Desperate to escape, the group agreed that they had to get the minibus back because Neil was always boasting that women were crazy about him. Everyone decided to send him out to lure Candy away from the bus by using the smell of blood from his wound. Neil successfully got her to step out of the vehicle and the rest immediately ran inside. Unfortunately, as soon as they started the engine, two female zombies suddenly appeared from behind the back row. The group panicked and ran away again. Patrick tried to grab the bag containing the phones, but a female zombie grabbed the other end of the bag. Both sides tugged violently until the bag strap broke. Immediately after, another female zombie rushed to attack him with an axe. But Patrick dodged it and ran straight toward a large billboard. The zombie caught up and slashed his leg with the axe. But Patrick still endured the pain to continue running, then climbed onto the billboard structure where the zombies could not reach. When checking the bag, he realized with disappointment that it was full of golf balls instead of phones. The rest of the group was surrounded by the zombie pack in a dead end. But right then, Patrick began hitting golf balls like playing baseball, striking the zombies to create a distraction. Vince and Matt ran to hide in a toy store, while Gavin, Graham, and Mike went into a clothing store. Neil picked up the scattered golf balls to throw back at the zombies and then hid in a house next to the church. But suddenly someone knocked him unconscious. In the toy store, Vince realized they had forgotten to lock the door and was forced to struggle with a female zombie who almost broke inside. Matt was extremely excited by a range of collector's edition items. But what made him most excited was finding a lot of nitro fluid of the type usually used for remote control cars. He poured some of that liquid on the zombie's hand, then used Vince's lighter to set it on fire. At the clothing store, they began to explore inside the shop and discovered the floor was covered in blood. And on a shelf, there was a severed head. In the fitting room, there was a female shop assistant who had been infected and immediately saw them. Gavin used his last bullet to shoot her. Meanwhile, Matt found toy walkie-talkies. He attached one walkie-talkie to a remote control car, then let it run out onto the street, carefully steering it around the zombies' feet until the car reached the clothing store. Mike successfully received the walkie-talkie signal and finally the two groups could communicate with each other. When realizing Neil was not with either group, they learned that he had been captured by a female zombie, tied to a chair to be a guest at her dinner. The cake on the table was decorated with human fingers and she did not hesitate to eat them right in front of Neil. Because Neil refused to play along with that sick game, the zombie approached and used an electric knife to cut off his finger. Then she ate that finger with a bit of cream. On the billboard pillar, Patrick remained calm thanks to his meditation recordings, while the zombie below used an axe to chop at the wooden structure to make him fall. The groups hiding in the two stores discussed a plan with each other over the walkie-talkies. Mike placed the severed head on the remote control car, while Gavin danced by the window to distract the whole zombie pack. The door opened and the car sped out. Vince then controlled it to lure the zombies away from the area. Next, Mike left the store to find a usable vehicle and discovered a military truck. But that also meant its glass was almost unbreakable no matter how he tried. In frustration, Mike banged on the vehicle, but accidentally triggered the alarm, causing the whole zombie pack to be attracted back. Having no other choice, Mike was forced to hide in the nearest building. And that place turned out to be a slaughterhouse. He went deep inside, only to discover a female zombie butcher chopping human limbs. The zombie immediately attacked, throwing Mike through the window. The rest began to worry because he never came back. Therefore, Matt and Vince decided to go find him. But first, Matt built a flamethrower using nitro fluid and some toys. He also gave Vince a toy gun. When they stepped outside, both were amazed to see the street completely empty. But right then, another female zombie took the opportunity to suddenly attack them from behind. Matt immediately used the flamethrower to burn her, causing the zombie to flee in panic. However, the toy used as a flamethrower also caught fire. Matt quickly threw it to the ground, only to discover that the nitro fluid had leaked everywhere and the fire was spreading very fast. The fire ran back toward the toy store and caused the whole place to explode violently. Back with Mike, after being thrown into the street, he tried to escape the zombie pack and ran back to the clothing store, while Vince and Matt rushed toward the church. Amidst countless human body parts scattered everywhere, the two discovered that this place used to be a military base. Therefore, they used the walkie-talkie to tell the rest of their friends to gather with them there. After that, they continued to explore the building and found an old lab where horrific experiments had clearly taken place. Those in the clothing store decided to disguise themselves as women, thanks to which they could leave that place safely because the zombies only attacked men. Meanwhile, the zombie had finished chopping down the billboard pillar, causing Patrick to fall. As she chased him, he immediately ran toward the minibus and saw Candy holding his golf club. Patrick snatched the club back from her hands, quickly closed the bus door and used the club to hit the zombie rushing up behind him. Back with the trio in disguise, they had to deal with a female zombie who began to show suspicion. She approached and punched them, but they immediately fought back and snapped her neck. Right then, Patrick found them, and the whole group ran together to the church. At the same time, Neil provoked the zombie to make her come closer, thanks to which, her electric knife cut through the ropes. He immediately grabbed the knife, attacked the creature, and ran away. When he reached the door, he realized the whole zombie pack was chasing him. So he climbed onto the roof through a window. From up there, he saw his group of friends in front of the church door, but when trying to wave a signal, he leaned against the roof and the structure broke, causing him to fall into a room full of infected strippers having a meal. The zombie strippers all wanted to eat him at the same time and began fighting over who would get to keep him, thanks to which Neil had a chance to escape and run to join his friends. The whole group managed to run inside the church for shelter just before the zombie pack caught up. Matt turned on the computer system and the screens showed the entire village was being monitored. The female politician appearing on the posters showed up on the screen, asking for a status update, but as soon as she saw the strange faces, she immediately cut the connection. Suddenly, the alarm on Gavin's watch went off, announcing that Phase 2 had begun. Outside, the infected women began to evolve, becoming smarter, faster, and more bizarre, while Gavin explained that Phase 1 only consisted of symptoms like illness, disorientation, and psychosis. The axe-wielding zombie began to chop hard at the door and Gavin revealed that he had found a device that could control the experiment. With that device, he could emit high-frequency sound waves that caused pain, a type of sound only women could hear and only took effect after they had transformed into Phase 2. However, when he pressed the button nothing happened. Gavin began to panic, thinking they had no hope left. Vince scolded him, because all of this was the consequence of the experiment he had performed for a stupid female politician. Right then, Matt found a bin full of washing powder, and the truth was revealed that the female politician was the one who had distributed free washing powder to every house, which contained the virus. Suddenly, Gavin coughed up blood then fell down dead to reveal Mike's infected grandmother standing behind him. Mike was heartbroken, but he still had to witness Matt suddenly approach her from behind and hit her with a golf club. Haunted by what he had just done, Matt went into the lab to be alone, and Vince followed to comfort him. However, when Vince found Matt, he had been killed by the burnt zombie. Vince went back to break the news to the group, making Mike furious, charging in to attack the zombie for revenge. Meanwhile, Banksy finally reached Moodley, but he didn't realize there was a female zombie inside the minibus. Back with the main group, they fought together against the zombie. While the others held her tight, Mike killed her with her own weapon. Then they realized the zombie pack had blocked the main door, so the whole group had to escape by the stairs and go to a hallway, where at the end appeared a truly horrific sight. All the corpses of men in the village had been piled up to form a nest for the zombies. A creature saw them and the whole group had to run again, rushing into a room to escape through the window, and then climb onto the roof. Right then Banksy was spotted by the builders, but that idiot started climbing up to join his friends. When the group scolded him and explained what was happening, he still didn't believe the story, but eventually still helped them when everyone moved the ladder and used it to cross to the next roof. Everyone crossed safely, feeling absolutely terrified, looking down to see the zombies waiting for them on the ground. However, Graham was lagging behind because he stayed back to block the door. A few female zombies managed to push him away and burst through the entrance. Graham immediately ran to cross the ladder after the others. But a female zombie caught up and pulled the ladder away, causing him to fall. Graham hit the ground hard and the whole zombie pack immediately rushed at him to eat his flesh. The remaining friends panicked, running along the roof, then climbed down. There they discovered Banksy had driven up in a tiny rental car. The whole group began to argue about who was at fault for everything. But Patrick interrupted them to confess that he still wanted to live longer. His speech was immediately cut short by another female zombie, who appeared and killed him on the spot. The surviving men hurried back to the minibus. When they opened the bus door, Candy tried to rush out to attack, but she froze when she saw Vince's face. He took advantage of that moment of distraction to punch her. While Vince and Neil restrained Candy, another female zombie approached Banksy and killed him with a broken bottle piece. Vince ran to check on Banksy, and Neil finally completely lost control. He punched Candy unconscious, then screamed to challenge the whole zombie pack to just come at them. His friends had to pull him into the minibus. But before leaving, Vince burned the photo of his ex-wife and declared that he was so fed up with women, and if they wanted to have a pet, it was better to buy a Labrador. Neil, in an increasingly broken and furious state, drove the minibus away, intentionally hitting as many zombies as possible on the way out of town. However, as they just reached the main road, the group heard Graham's voice over the walkie-talkie. It turned out he had been thrown into the nest with the other bodies and was calling for help to be rescued. The remaining 3 men immediately turned the car back and prepared to fight with golf clubs. Meanwhile, Graham found the system's remote control, then climbed the stairs, where he discovered a wire had been disconnected. He fixed everything and pressed a button, activating the speaker system that the military had installed throughout the town, causing all the zombies to immediately freeze in place. Afterward, Graham reunited with his friends, and Neil took the remote to play with it for fun. He pressed the button repeatedly to tease the zombies, even getting very close because he knew they couldn't touch him. Then he threw the remote back to his friends, but the device fell to the ground and shattered. The system immediately failed and the zombies were released again, so the friends pushed Graham into a shopping cart and started running for their lives in desperation. Closing the movie Doghouse, a horror science fiction work released in 2009. The movie closes in a way that is both horrific and darkly funny. When the men thought they had finally survived, they personally ruined their only chance just because they were overconfident and liked to play stupid jokes. After all the blood, corpses, and hundreds of female zombies in a mad pursuit, the thing that almost killed them many times was not just the zombies but also their own personalities, when everyone was selfish, childish, and always blamed women in every situation. The humorous meaning of the movie lies in the fact that it intentionally satirizes the familiar thought of many men that all troubles originate from women, from nagging wives, controlling lovers, divorce, jealousy to the zombie apocalypse. The group of male characters turn everything into a reason to complain about suffering because of women. But ironically, it is they who constantly cause stupid mistakes, ruin plans, and make things worse. The movie doesn't really say women are the problem, but is trolling the type of men who are grown up but behave like children, who always like to gather to hide from women but in the end cannot survive without them. Therefore, the ending both creates a sense of horror tension and makes viewers laugh, because all that terrible chaos started from a weekend trip full of complaints about women by a bunch of comedy men.